There is only one gesture, just one. And when you embody it, you don't need to say anything else. That gesture shows him that you are a woman of high value. And without you even realizing it, it changes everything. It's not what you say. It's not what you give. It's not how much effort you make. It's how you withdraw, how you move, how you choose not to stay where you no longer resonate with your truth. And that, even if it seems small, shakes his unconscious more than any explanation. In this video, I'm going to reveal to you the only gesture that positions you in his mind, not as an option, but as an unforgettable presence. I'm going to take you from that place where you doubt, where you wait, where you ask yourself why he doesn't value you, to the exact point where your energy alone makes it clear to him that he no longer has access to you unless he comes with respect, clarity, and awareness. So activate your like right now and subscribe. It's totally free for you, and that supports me a lot. Ready? Let's go. First key, the trap of proving your value. Why do your efforts to impress him make you look less valuable? Here's the truth that almost no one dares to tell you. The mere fact that you feel you have to prove your value is already projecting that you don't feel it inside yourself. And that changes everything. From the moment you obsess over showing him how good you are, how understanding you can be, how much love you have to give, how interesting it can be to be with you, you've already fallen into the trap, and your energy has shifted from queen to supplicant, from center to orbiting, from a woman of high value to a woman who needs to be seen to feel valuable. And this is the first silent mistake that ruins a man's desire, choice, and respect for a woman, even if he doesn't know how to explain it. Why? Because what you're doing vibrates like seeking approval, and the masculine unconscious does not respond with attraction to an energy that seems to ask for permission. It doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter how much you try. When your intention is to be validated, your vibration falls. Carl Jung explained it plainly. What you do to get something from outside is exactly what you are denying inside yourself. And that is what's happening here. From deep psychology, masculine desire is not activated by the woman who gives the most, but by the woman who most belongs to herself. And a woman who belongs to herself has nothing to prove. She doesn't need to look perfect. She doesn't need to be liked. She doesn't need to impress. She just is. She knows. She vibrates from her core, and from there simply allows herself to be observed without anxiety. I'll tell you something that happens more often than you think. A woman starts dating a man she likes a lot, and noticing his interest, she activates an unconscious pattern. She answers immediately, even if she's busy. She cooks his favorite dish without him asking for it. She accepts last-minute changes to adjust to his schedule. She asks questions that seem attentive, but actually seek to confirm if he's still there. All that from the outside may seem like giving, interest, good energy, but from the more subtle, energetic level, it all feels like effort to get validation. And that vibration, even if unspoken, is what creates the first crack in the perception of value. Because a man unconsciously thinks, she tries too hard. She must be valuable. He thinks, if she needs to prove it so much, maybe she doesn't know it. And that, love, changes everything. Because the masculine does not surrender to the woman who gives herself completely. It surrenders to the woman who has no need to convince, who is so anchored in her own certainty that she can give you the best of herself without needing to be chosen for it. And here is the brutal paradox. The more you try to prove that you are worthy, the less worthy you appear to the unconscious. Because true value is not shouted, it is vibrated, embodied, breathed. And this is the sacred principle that separates a woman who impresses him for a while from a woman who transforms him forever. You're not here to convince anyone of who you are. You're here to remember who you are, and whoever is ready will feel it. I'll tell you a true story that illustrates it. Camila was starting something with a man who dazzled her, and without realizing it, she started losing herself. She stopped making her own plans. She dressed up more than usual for each meeting and analyzed every message he sent as if it were a secret code. All so she wouldn't fail, all so he would see her. Until one day he simply stopped reaching out. And she, broken inside, asked him directly, "Was I too much?" And he, not wanting to hurt her, said a phrase that was etched into her soul. "I feel like everything was too perfect, but I don't know who you are when you're not trying to please me." And that was like an emotional bomb, because Camilla understood that her effort had shouted the opposite of what she believed. She thought she was showing her value, but her over-presence screamed, "Have you seen me? Am I enough for you?" And that was what pushed him away. From that day on, Camilla stopped proving. She started doing, went back to her hobbies, returned to her rhythm, went back to writing, and above all, remembered that value is not begged for, it's held. And the most curious thing is that weeks later that man came back. But this time he was the one making the effort because something in her energy had changed. She was no longer waiting to be seen. She was shining on her own. And that's when he understood. The gesture that changes everything begins by stopping the need to prove anything. And that is the threshold that prepares you for what comes next. Because if this first key was the deactivation of the error, the next key is the direct revelation of the exact gesture that emits the energy of high value without saying a word. Get ready, because what you're about to discover next is the silent and brutally powerful gesture that a real woman uses when he gives her ambiguous answers, when he cancels at the last minute, when he doubts his interest. And that gesture not only throws him off, it changes everything. Second key, the Queen's gesture, the art of withdrawing calmly when he expects you to fight. I'm going to take a quick pause to ask you something from the heart. I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. That allows me to keep creating these soulful messages. And the best part is, it's totally free for you. Subscribe now, and let's continue with the most powerful part coming next. This is the exact point where the game changes, where you change, and where he shakes up. Because this is not a common gesture, it's not a typical response. And that's precisely why it's unforgettable. It's not about ignoring him. It's not about revenge. It's not about manipulation. It's about breaking the emotional pattern that he unconsciously expects you to repeat. That pattern where when you see him pulling away, you come closer. That pattern where he gives you a weak excuse and you give him infinite understanding. That pattern where he says, "Let's see what happens," and you interpret that as an invitation to stay and fight. But you will no longer follow that script, because you are not the woman who reacts. You are the woman who responds from the throne. And from that place comes the gesture. The Queen's gesture is simple but devastating. Withdrawing calmly. When he expects you to fight, listen carefully. When he is ambiguous, when he cancels last minute, when his energy is no longer clear, you don't give drama, you don't demand, you don't question, you don't send a 3-paragraph emotional text. You simply withdraw calmly, with dignity, with presence. Your response is serene. "I hope things go well for you." And then you disappear. Not with anger, not with sarcasm, not with manipulation, but with such disarming peace that he doesn't know if losing you was his decision or his biggest mistake, because what he expected was something else. He expected a reaction, proof that it affected you, a sign that he still has power over you. And you, without saying a word, show him that he no longer does. That is the gesture, and it's powerful because he doesn't understand it. He feels it. Your silence is not punishment. Your absence is not a strategy. It is an energetic declaration. You are no longer vibrating at the height of my center, and I do not negotiate my energy with incoherence. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious is activated by the unexpected. When a woman breaks the emotional pattern a man anticipates, something in his psyche awakens. And that is exactly what this gesture does. Because when you don't respond with drama, anxiety, or begging, he faces for the first time his own emptiness, his inconsistency, his lack of clarity, and you become the most brutal mirror he has ever had. A man can ignore your words, justify your complaints, dodge your tears, but he cannot ignore a silent withdrawal that does not seek punishment, but expansion. And here is the most important thing. This gesture only works if it's real. If you do it to make him come back, it doesn't work. If you do it expecting a reaction, it loses its power. This gesture is not for him, it's for you. Because when you choose to withdraw calmly, you are not trying to control anything. You are reaffirming that your peace is non-negotiable, and that's what changes everything. I'll tell you something Clara experienced. After 3 weeks of feeling that the man she was getting to know had lowered his energy, Clara received a vague message. "I'm really busy lately. We'll see if we meet on the weekend." Clara felt a knot in her stomach. The old her would have replied, "Sure, I understand. Let me know when you can." Or worse, "All good, I notice you're distant." Or the classic, "Did I do something wrong?" But Clara breathed. She remembered who she was, remembered what her energy was worth, and simply wrote, "Okay, take good care." And then silence. She uninstalled the expectation, went back to her plans, continued with her life. She didn't block him, didn't delete him. She just let go. Really, 3 days later, he appeared with a different energy, respect, clarity, and the phrase, "No one has ever responded to me like that. It made me think about what I'm doing." And that is the Queen's gesture. It doesn't seek a reaction, it causes reflection. Because a woman of high value doesn't need to raise her voice. Her absence already says it all. And you don't make this gesture for him. You do it because you know that every time you stay, or your energy isn't respected, you are abandoning yourself. And you're not here to abandon yourself again. You're here to rise. And right there, when this gesture happens without struggle, without acting, without anxiety, something psychologically brutal happens. He begins to feel that he is losing you, without screams, without words, without goodbyes. And that disarms him, makes him look at you differently, and confronts him with his emotional truth. Stay close because in the next key will reveal why this gesture impacts him so much, how it rewires his mind, and why he perceives you as unique without understanding why. Third key, the psychology behind the impact. Why does your withdrawal awaken him and magnify your value? You think that when you withdraw calmly, you are letting him go. But what you are really doing is activating a part of his psyche that even he doesn't understand. Because a man can resist your words, ignore your complaints, minimize your emotions, but he cannot ignore the void your energy leaves when it leaves in peace. And this is the exact point where psychology explains everything. Carl Jung said that the male unconscious projects the anima, the internal feminine energy, as a figure that not only attracts sexually, but also generates expansion, introspection, and transformation. But that expansion does not happen with a woman who gives herself unconditionally, nor with the one who chases, nor with the one who adapts. That expansion activates with the woman who, when she doesn't resonate with what she deserves, leaves silently, without punishment, without fear, without turning her face away. That gesture, as we saw before, breaks the pattern he expects. But now let's go deeper. Let's understand why that reconfigures him from the inside. From emotional psychology, the male brain is designed to respond to risk and loss. When something is guaranteed, always available, without limits or filters, the neurological system classifies it as safe, stable, and not urgent. And what happens with what is not urgent? It gets postponed, taken for granted, underestimated. That's why when you are always there, when you justify his mood swings, when you tolerate his lack of clarity, when you keep showing interest even though he doesn't, what your energy tells him is not, "I love you," but "You can give me less. I'll stay anyway." And the male unconscious, upon receiving that, loses the incentive to grow, to define himself, to make an effort, because there is no emotional risk. There is no possibility of losing. And here's the key. When you make the Queen's gesture, when you withdraw calmly instead of arguing or chasing, He doesn't feel like you're punishing him. He feels like he is losing you and can't stop it. And that awakens a totally different response because now the risk is present. You are no longer safe, no longer guaranteed. And the most brutal part, you are no longer his automatic source of validation, and that confronts him with his own lack of worth. Not because you point it out, but because your absence begins to reflect what he stopped caring for. And if there is something that impacts a real man, it is not that you correct him, but that your energy is no longer available, that your vibration, the one that calmed him, lit him up, emotionally nourished him, is no longer within his reach. And not because you hate him, but because you chose yourself. That confuses him, that touches him in the deepest part because he can no longer explain what he feels. He only knows that something is missing, and that was you. I'll tell you a story that illustrates this. Sophia had been in an on and off relationship for months with someone who treated her well, but never committed. Every time they talked about moving forward, he said, "We'll see. I've been struggling to connect lately." And Sophia, trying to be empathetic, responded with understanding, supported him, waited, stayed, until one day he said again, "Maybe now is not the time. Let's talk next week." And that phrase didn't trigger her, it awakened her. That night she didn't cry, didn't write, didn't explain. She just replied, "I understand. No need to let me know. Take care." And she didn't talk to him again. She didn't block him, didn't post indirect messages. She just let go with full presence. And what happened? A week later, he appeared with a long message, not with excuses, but with clarity. "Since you've been gone, I realized the space you filled and how little I gave. If you're still open to talking, I'd like to do things differently." Sophia wasn't expecting it because she was no longer expecting him, and that's the most important thing. The gesture was authentic, not a strategy to get him back, but a real declaration of high value. And that's why it had power. Because a real gesture born from a woman who doesn't seek a reaction, but respect transcends. And here is the deep message you should take with you. Value is not demonstrated when he pays attention to you. Your true value magnifies the moment he realizes he can lose you, and you don't try to prevent it. That's where the turning point happens. That's where he begins to see you as something irreplaceable. That's where your image changes in his mind, and he no longer sees you as the woman who fought to stay, but as the woman who chose herself before him. And that image doesn't fade. And now that you know why that single gesture impacts him so much, why it breaks his unconscious pattern, and why it awakens him without a word, get ready for what's next. Because in the next key, I'm going to tell you a real, powerful, and concrete story where one simple phrase, spoken calmly and without drama, completely turned a relationship around. And after that, he never saw her the same way again. Fourth key, the story of the open door. How a simple gesture of not chasing changed the destiny of a relationship. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Don't insist, don't fight, don't chase. Simply open the door and don't close it from inside with anxiety. This key is not theory. It's experience. It's skin. It's soul. It's what happens when a high-value woman stops trying to control the outcome and begins to vibrate with such clarity that her absence communicates more than 1,000 speeches. I'll tell you the real story of Juliana. A simple story in appearance, but brutal in impact. Juliana had been seeing Mauro for 3 months. Everything flowed well. Deep conversations, emotional connection, real attraction. But every time they got close to something more defined, he backed off with ambiguous phrases. "I don't want to pressure us. Let's see what happens. I don't want to ruin what we have with labels." And Juliana, wanting to make it work, gave in. Not out of weakness, but because of that subtle fear many women feel. The fear of making him uncomfortable, seeming demanding, or losing what seemed so good, even if incomplete. So she accepted it. 1 week, yes, the next no. Last-minute plans, inconsistent messages, partial presence. Until one day, after he canceled a date at the last minute with a simple, "The day got complicated, let's leave it for next time," something inside Juliana changed. She didn't explode. She didn't write an emotional manifesto. She didn't ask for explanations. She just breathed and wrote, "It's okay, Mauro, take care. I also need clarity to know where I'm going." And she said no more. She didn't clarify. She didn't push. She didn't write back. She didn't block him. She just opened the door and didn't close it. But here's the key point. She didn't leave it ajar for him to enter with doubts. She left it open to leave herself, without resentment, without urgency, without rancor, only with dignity. Days passed, and with every day Mauro didn't receive a message, with every Instagram story where she appeared smiling with friends, with every silence that held no punishment, his perception began to change. Because what once seemed guaranteed now felt distant. What once waited for him now went on without him. And the most disconcerting thing, she didn't look for him. A week later, Mauro sent a message, but Juliana didn't respond immediately. Not as a strategy, because she wasn't waiting for him anymore. Her energy was already elsewhere, at her center, at her axis, in her life. When they finally spoke, he said something she never forgot. "I don't understand why, but your silence hurt me more than any fight I've had with another woman. I realized you never closed the door, but you were the one who crossed it first." And there was the gesture, the withdrawal, the not chasing. That moment changed everything. Mauro began to show up more present, more defined, clearer, not out of fear of losing her, but because he understood that she wasn't the woman who needed convincing to stay. She was the woman who knew how to leave when the vibration wasn't right. And that activates respect, awakens commitment, and elevates your value in his eyes. Because when you don't pressure, when you don't dramatize, when you don't perform the show he expects, you give him the most uncomfortable and powerful gift of all, his own reflection. And when that image is etched in his mind, the image of a woman who withdrew without destroying anything, he can see you the same way again. Because you didn't slam the door in his face, you didn't block him, you didn't curse him, you just showed that if he didn't choose clearly, you could. And that, dear one, not everyone can do. Only a woman who has already understood that her value doesn't need to be explained, only upheld. And that woman, even if he takes time to react, always stays tattooed in his memory. Because she wasn't the loudest, she was the most conscious. And that consciousness brings us to the final point. Because this gesture, this silence, this serene withdrawal doesn't work if you do it expecting a reaction. It only works when it's born from something much greater, an internal state that no longer seeks respect because it already respects itself. Stay close, because in the next key, you'll discover why you can't fake this gesture and how to truly become the woman who embodies it effortlessly, not as a tactic, but as your new truth. Fifth key, how to cultivate the internal state so that the gesture is authentic. You can't fake being the queen. You have to be her. You already know the gesture. You know when to use it. You've seen the impact it has. But this is where many women fail. They want to use the gesture without having done the inner work that supports it. And when they do it from strategy, from acting, from "let's see if he reacts," it not only doesn't work, but leaves them even emptier. Because what is done with anxiety disguised as dignity is always noticeable. And the male unconscious, I tell you clearly, may not understand your words, but always senses your vibration. And if you fake being a high-value woman, but inside you're still waiting for him to come back, to understand, to react, that gesture loses its power. That's why this last key is not for him, it's for you. Because if you don't cultivate the right internal state, the gesture of withdrawing calmly will be a mask, not a real expression of your power. Carl Jung said that true transformation happens when what you do, what you think, and what you feel are aligned. And that's the only way this gesture will be authentic. when you no longer do it to provoke a reaction, but because your soul no longer accepts less. So, how do you get to that internal state? Here I reveal it to you. This is the invisible protocol of every woman who not only acts like a queen, but becomes one. 1. Stop living in the waiting room of his decision. If your day depends on whether he wrote you or not, if your mood changes with each of his messages, if your plans revolve around whether he shows up, you are giving away your center. And a high-value woman does not wait to be chosen, she chooses. And if someone doesn't resonate with her presence, she withdraws, not out of pride, but out of instinct for preservation. Your peace is your new priority. 2. Create a life so rich and authentic that you don't have time to chase validation. True power is not in saying, "I love myself." It's in having a life that you love, filling your schedule with yourself, with what you're passionate about, with what connects you, with what reminds you that you are much more than someone waiting for love. Do things without telling anyone. Move without explaining. Recover without posting about it. Let your inner world be so abundant that no one else has the power to destabilize it. 3. Learn to be with yourself without punishment. Many women don't withdraw because they don't know how to be alone, because silence feels like punishment, because if he doesn't write, they feel the world is turning off. But an integrated woman learns to use silence as alchemy, to be with herself without anxiety, to enjoy her solitude as if it were a temple, not a prison. The queen is not alone. She is accompanied by her own presence, and that is magnetic. 4. Reprogram your internal language, because it's no use acting firm outwardly. If inside you are saying, "He's probably with someone else. I wasn't enough. If I lost him forever, maybe I should have given more." Every thought is an energetic signal. And if inside you keep talking to yourself like a woman who depends on his approval, your energetic field will scream lack, even if you're silent. Change your phrases. Say, "I didn't lose him. I recovered myself. It wasn't love. It was attachment. I don't need to prove my worth. I already am. If he walked away, it's because the universe is clearing the way. My soul has already chosen peace. The rest is extra." 5. Remember that your power lies in your absence, but your magnetism lies in your authenticity. You don't become a high-value woman by acting tough. You become one when you are faithful to yourself, even when it hurts, when you don't beg, even though you love him, when you don't return, even if you want to, when you don't justify the unjustifiable, when you don't stay where you're not chosen with certainty, because you don't need him to see your value. You only need to never forget it yourself. And when that internal state becomes natural, the gesture is no longer a decision. It's a consequence. You're no longer forcing your absence. You're holding your center. And there, right there, is where the magic happens. You don't become unforgettable because of what you say, or what you give, or what you endure. You become unforgettable because one day you stopped fighting for love and started holding your truth without asking for permission. And that woman, the one who stays alone if necessary, the one who doesn't return where there is no respect, the one who chooses calm even if it hurts, is the woman who, without looking for it, changes everything. And now that you know the gesture, that you understood its power, and that you have felt how a real woman embodies it from within, get ready, because what comes next is not an ending. It's a final activation, a phrase, a memory, a truth that will be tattooed on your soul and won't let you go back. Stay tuned, because the conclusion will seal everything. Conclusion, now you know. It wasn't your effort, it wasn't your words, it wasn't everything you gave. What truly changed everything was that single gesture, that silent, serene, sacred decision to not beg, not insist, not stay where your energy isn't clearly seen. That exact moment when, instead of reacting, you withdrew in peace, and without a word, you said more than in all the messages you could never send. Because your high value wasn't shouted, it was embodied, not proven. It was sustained, not forced. It became real. And that is the woman he doesn't forget. Not because of what she did, but because of how she vibrated. How she knew when to leave without complaining. How she chose her peace above her fear. How she left the door open but crossed alone to the other side without waiting to be followed. And now it's your turn. Not to keep acting as if your value depended on someone else, but to remember that your presence alone, well embodied, well positioned, well lived, already says it all. Comment below with conviction. My energy speaks louder than my words. I have already chosen myself. Do it as an act of liberation, as a symbol of your new standard, as a promise to yourself. Because from today on, you don't need to do more. You just need to be who you already are and let the world decide if it's ready to hold you. If this message resonated with your soul, it's time to take the next step. Subscribe now to keep raising your vibration with every new video. Give this content a like so more souls can hear what has freed you today. Share this video with those you know also need to let go to heal. And of course, leave your declaration in the comments so this message remains sealed in your energy. But above all, don't leave just yet. Here on the screen, I leave you the next video on this path of transformation. Click and keep deepening, because your soul has already started this journey and deserves to complete it. As always, I'll be Gabriel, your favorite psychologist and philosopher. See you there.